You all give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, or someone unmute themselves and let me know that you can hear me speaking at this time. All right.
I
Thank
can
you
hear
so much.
you.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you all, and welcome to another
Hi,
session of EdTech
Steve.
Tuesdays with ATMs and friends. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the Assistive Technology and Accessibility, a need to know. So thank you all once again for joining us. My name is Pernell Allen. I am the Alabama Technology and Motion Specialist located at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB. Go Blazers. Those are the universities to the left of where other ATEM specialists and regional in-service centers are located across the state. That's my email contact right there. If you need to get in touch with me, either one of those emails I do respond to. And if you're on Twitter, or should I say X, you can follow me at UAB_ATEM. If you like this session or any session provided by ATEM, please use hashtag ATEMPD on any social media platform. Region 5 search the following LEAs. That includes Alabama Aerospace and Aviation, Bessemer, Birmingham, Empower, Freedom Academy, Fairfield, I3 Academy, Jefferson County, Leeds, Legacy Prep, Magic City Acceptance Academy, Midfield, Tarrant, and Trustville City Schools. You see a list of our spring semester sessions that we have going on. First one being of this year is Assistive Technology and Accessibility, followed by Take Flight, Inspire Creativity with Adobe, Make Math Matter, and then May I Teach You About Engaging Technology Tools and Strategies. That is our lineup. If you like this one, and feel free to join us for the upcoming ones as well. If you have not heard of Tim Talks, that's a podcast hosted by my colleague Angela Clark and myself, where we talk about different initiatives across the state, as well as try to put a highlight on things that are going on in schools around the state. The latest episodes include episode 10 and 11, where episode 10 we have Brooke Dunham, who is a principal of Inverness Elementary, as well as episode 11, which is about access. Hosted the guest voice on that one was Steve Blair, who is the access administrator. And especially those who you are middle or high school, that will be a great episode for you to check out. You can listen to Tim Talks on Spotify, Amazon, as well as Apple. And without any further ado, and we had a few technical difficulties, so we're going to make sure that everything is functioning properly. But the reason that you're here today is to join us for EdTech Tuesday with this assistive technology, accessibility, a need to know, presented by Sheila Bowling. So we're going to give Sheila an opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing. Sheila, you want to check your audio real quick? Let's see, is everything up to par? Let me see. I see. Did we still say it again, Sheila? It's coming in muffled. We can I heard something. If that was you,
It's come muffled. Okay.
that's clear right there. Whatever you just did, I can hear you better.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing, give you an opportunity so that you can actually share.
So everyone should be able to see my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I am Sheila Bowling. I am responsible for assistive technology here at the State Department of Education in Special Education Services. And so today we're going to talk about assistive technology and accessibility because they are a little bit different. But all of them are going to give access to students with disabilities. And when you look at these, you're going to realize too that you can use these with all students. We're coming to that point in the world nowadays. So, on the screen, I would ask you, what do these things have in common? And all of these are things that we use nowadays that started off for people with disabilities. And so you're looking at the touch screens, the voice activated assistants, word prediction, we use that every day, voice dictation, on demand video content, YouTube, and computers at your seats, which are just laptops. And so, having said that, these all started out assisting people, or the technology started out to assist people with disabilities. And so, I like to say it's not impossible, it just hasn't been done yet. So there are so many things that we're seeing nowadays when I was growing up in school, we never even thought about. So for people or for students without disabilities, technology makes things easier. But for students with disabilities, technology makes things possible. And so let's start off with the definition of what assistive technology is. And I am going to try to speak a little slower because, as you can see across the screen, I do have on closed captioning, and it is captioning my voice. However, it goes a little bit slower than I talk. So I'm going to try to slow things down. And we may not finish everything in the presentation, but you'll have an understanding of everything once we're done. Well, assistive technology consists of two parts. You usually have devices and you have services. So an assistive technology device is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child, in our case as school administrators and teachers, of a child with a disability. Now, assistive technology does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted or the replacement of such a device. However, if the device that has been inserted, if it has an external battery, or is the school system responsible for replacing those batteries? Assistive technology service. And a service is anything that directly assists an individual with a disability in the selection, acquisition, or the use of an assistive technology device. So in that case, let's look at what we're talking about children with disabilities. Assistive technology considers the whole child because we're going to look at the child's strengths to combat those weaknesses that they have. So we're going to be talking about cognition. That's how the student receives information and understands. Communication, that's how the child expresses themselves. Fine motor skills, that's how the child will either eat, write, draw, put the button, all those things that we do in life. Vision, you know what that is how the child sees. Hearing, how are they hearing? And their gross motor skills, how are they ambulating around that school environment? All right, so I like to say this too. Don't diss my ability. Why? Because we're looking at what the child can do and not what they can't do. We don't even know what they can't do. It's our job to figure out how we can use what they can do to help with what they can't do. Now, assistive technology, and we're talking about technology in general, I will ask you this question. Is this accessibility? And because I'm asking you that question, I already know the answer. The answer is no. Just because something is digital does not make it accessible. Accessible is if that person with the disability can use it just like you or I can use it. Okay, now, this looks like it has absolutely nothing to do with assistive technology or accessibility, and you're right, it doesn't. I just thought I would throw this in. And the reason being is because around the office, especially here in my office, I walk around to see if people, their chairs and their desk, are they ergonomically fit for that person. So when you look at this, I want you to see several things, and this goes along for students as well, especially students that have physical disabilities. Make sure when you're seated at your chair that your monitor is at proper height, that you're not looking up or looking down, but you're looking straight ahead at what's on that monitor. Your arms and shoulders, this is extremely important, are in a relaxed position. If you can see my cursor here, and I should have made it a little bit bigger, but if you see this arrow, the yellow and blue arrow that's pointing straight up to the armrest on the chair, you can see between the armrest and that desk that they are absolutely parallel to each other. So many people experience wrist fractures and hurting wrist and carpal tunnel because their seats and their chairs are not at the correct height. So make sure your seat is lifted at the correct height. Make sure your armrests are parallel to your desk. And then make sure if needed that your leg and feet, that you have a footrest if you're not tall enough. for your feet to touch the floor. Make sure you have a leg rest. I just thought I'd throw that in because you will need it for yourself, but you'll also need it for students who have, when they have to have adjusted height desk as well. So when you, as a teacher or as an administrator, when you are actually showing a PowerPoint, we always want to make sure that our PowerPoints are accessible to everyone. That's people with visual issues, people with hearing issues. We want to make sure it's accessible. So if you are using pictures in a PowerPoint and you are uploading that PowerPoint to a folder where everybody can get to it, make sure that it's accessible. Alt text. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, what's it worth to a person who cannot see? So without words, it's easy for people with a visual disability to miss critical information or get frustrated with the experience. So make sure you always have alt text describing what that picture is when you are presenting to students. Another thing, and these are all about presentations, let's look at the font size, the color, and the reliability. Why are we looking at that? We are looking at that because it's important for people with visual issues. So many times we have things that are really cute, but they're not accessible to people that have real visual issues. So as you can see, I've chosen font size, color, and the readability of the text. It's not all cutesy. It's there so that people who have these disabilities can actually see. So you can see I have the yellow on black, and I want to show you this, I have the white on black. But if you look at where it says choose font size, and it's the black on purple, that is horrible when you are presenting. Because I can see that up close, and if you're sitting in front of your computer, you can see it up close. However, if I projected that onto a screen, no one in the back could see that because there's not enough contrast between the colors. So make sure that you have a lot of contrast, and you can see I've written some of this so that you could see what that contrast should look like. Now, you probably see this because you're sitting again in front of your computer. I just simply wrote, what about hearing impairment? I didn't write that because of hearing. I wanted you to see how we do a lot of cute things where you have light writing on a light background. It's very difficult to discriminate. So never, always remember, if you have a background, look at this. This is cute, right? Not for someone with a visual disability. First of all, it's busy because the hand keeps moving. But assistive technology and accessibility, that title is not discriminated enough, so you can't see it with that busy background and with that light background. All right? So let's have a not so busy background. I want to show you because this is horrible again. This is what not to do. You have a background that's moving, but you have dark text, and the white text you can kind of see, but it's all in this movement that causes the issue. And another thing, use the entire screen. I wanted to show this because I wanted you to see, I see so many presentations where they have tiny writing, and because they can see it when they're creating the PowerPoint, they think someone can see it at a distance. It's not so. You have different kinds of projectors, and some project well, some don't. So,
Sheila,
yes.
I'm sorry. I was trying to make sure that no one else is having difficulties. I can actually hear you even better now than I did when you began, but I see someone has placed in the chat that they can hardly hear. If you would try turning up your audio, is that better now for you? Can you hear now? Try turning it up on your end.
I was going to say my audio is as loud as it can go.
No, you okay now. It sounds way better than it did when you began. So I
Okay.
was just trying to make sure those people who was placing that in the chat has an understanding. So they said they can hear better now. Okay, great. Okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Sheila. All right.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So use the full screen. If you have a big screen, use the full screen. Why? Because it's just so much better for people with visual issues. And you can see the difference there. All right. Now, let's talk about categories of disabilities. And as you can see, Now, I'm going to explain something that's happening that hasn't been happening. If you have a newer computer, or if you have a newer PowerPoint, then usually, as you can see my words going across the screen, the closed captioning or the live captioning, as you can see that, usually what happens in the newer computers is they move your slide up so that none of the words are covered. And so some of the words in mine now are covered. I will read those words, but I wanted to explain that to you because it should have moved up, but I did switch to an older computer because my newer computer was having issues to begin with. So let's talk about the categories of disabilities. You have physical disabilities, you have sensory disabilities, and you have cognitive disabilities. So we are going to talk about each one of those. So for physical disabilities, those are things, and you'll see students have these in schools like cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, spinal cord injuries, osteogenesis imperfecta, and that is the brittle bone disease, amputations, strokes, arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. Those are things that we see affecting students in the classroom. And we're going to talk about those, not in detail, but we're going to talk about some accessibility things that can support those. You have sensory issues, and I only talked about sensory. When you talk about sensory disabilities, you're generally talking about your five senses. And there are some more things that go along with those, but I'm going to talk about the two that are most prevalent in the schools, and that's visual impairments and hearing impairments. And we're going to show you some of these things, but with those, you're going to use things such as screen readers, braille displays, magnification software, portable electronic magnifiers. And with hearing impairments, you're going to have the hearing aids, and you're going to have FM systems, and you're going to look at using closed captioning. So for cognitive disabilities, those are what we deal with the most in schools. Things such as autism, developmental delay, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairments, traumatic brain injury, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, and emotional disabilities. And those are all sensory cognitive disabilities. So when we're talking about disabilities, let's remember not all disabilities are visible. And I love this one about math because it takes people a few seconds to get it. Math illiteracy affects 8 out of every 5 people. That's pretty funny to me. I didn't laugh just then, but I always laugh when I read that. All right, now these are things that are going back that are super old, but I wanted to show these to you because these are things that make reading accessible to people with disabilities. So, for examples, we have reading guides. Reading guides probably are 30, 40 years old, but they still work because they isolate words for students who would have issues or get lost on a page. You can have the bar magnifier, which will magnify words as they move those things down. Now, I wanted to talk about these because these are accessibility things that support students with reading issues. News ELA, Newsella, however you pronounce it. This is a game changer for some students with reading issues because you can make accommodations for students in the classroom with these. Because as you see here on the side, these are different Lexile levels. And so I'm having the students read the relocation plan for threatened tortoises put on hold by Marines, right? And every student in that classroom can read it because I can change that Lexile level to meet the needs of the student. Rewordify. Now, I'm going to tell you, Rewordify has been out well over 10 years, but every time I do this presentation, people still don't know about it. What Rewordify does is it actually changes the words so that if you have students in your classroom, and I will say in your classroom, this is not a State Department position, but I say if you've got kids in high school that are having issues reading, it's probably, you're going to teach them how to read, but guess what? You guys in high school don't work on that as much. So I think now it's time to teach the child to fish. So let's look at Rewordify. It will change words for the students so it takes them from frustration to understanding. So it says, don't let an obtruse lexicon heighten your trepidation. Rewordify can assuage your anxiety. And so when you look at that, Rewordify will change it to where you can understand it. Don't let a difficult and confusing word list increase your fear and nervousness. Rewordify.com can calm your fear and stress. That's a game changer for students who are having difficulty reading. A game changer. So you can see here, I'm not going to go into detail with this, but it will change. It can have the word alongside the word. So the word was, I used to loathe and eschew pursuing reading, but it will have the word of what it means. I used to hate and avoid carefully reading. And so that shows you perusing. I'm sorry, I said pursuing. That was perusing. Forgive me for that. But you have all of that there so that it shows you that it can change the meaning for students and help students really understand. Now, I know many of you have read and write. Read and write has really become more robust now than it used to be. It has all of the dictionaries that you need, it has picture dictionaries. So let's talk about working with a student who is really on a low level, but that student is in your classroom. You can have that student use read and write to help them. Maybe they're a visual learner and they really need a picture dictionary. And you can say, Sheila, that's low level. And I could say, yes, it is. But how many students do you have that are visual students that need things shown to them visually? So if you are a school that uses read and write, I would say look at it again because they've really beefed up a lot of things in read and write here lately. Okay. Immersive reader. Immersive reader is found in most places now. And so with that, all you're doing is showing those students how things can be read out loud to them. And that to me is a game changer. Natural reader. I can say some years ago, Natural Reader used to be free. There is a free version, but of course, there is a more robust version. And again, Natural Reader is one of those things that reads text out loud to students. And so if you have a student in your classroom and you give a whole class assignment and you're actually saying, okay, students, I need you to read. You could put a student that has a reading difficulty, give them a headset and let them read right along with what the rest of the class is reading and gain just as much understanding from what you're trying to teach. Because when you tell the class to read something, you're not telling them to read for a grade. You're asking them to read for understanding. So if you're using things such as Natural Reader, Read and Write, all of those things, Rewordify, if you're using things like that in your classroom, it can truly help those students gain what they were not gaining. And I dare say it will help some discipline issues. Audiobooks. Now, Bookshare. Bookshare is one of those things that not every student will have access to, but for those students in your class with disabilities, they can have a free Bookshare account. And any book that you have in your classroom that they need to read, you can have Bookshare send you, have that student download the app, and they can actually follow along with the students in the classroom. Bookshare to me is a game changer along with Learning Ally. Now, Learning Ally is not free, but what Learning Ally has done is Learning Ally has all human read books. And that's a game changer because it's not a computerized voice. These are human voices. And actually, they have teamed up with Bookshare and they've teamed up with a lot of other companies that I'll show you in a few minutes. So if you qualify for one, you can actually qualify for all of them, and you don't need to go through any kind of qualifications for that. Now, Learning Ally has done something a little bit differently than other companies. Learning Ally now, it used to be when I was in the school system that you had to qualify, in that a professional had to qualify you, a professional that worked with students with disabilities. Now, a teacher can qualify a student, and that student now is still at a cost, but your schools can pay for most of your kids to have Learning Ally if that is an issue, if reading is an issue like I know it is in most middle and high schools. Now, that all may read. These are reading services for students that are blind, visually impaired. They have the talking books, they have all of that. That all may read is a really good another library service for some of your students with disabilities. so that they can have access to books just like everyone else. Now, I put this in here because this is not Access Tech Text Network. This is for students in college. And I put this in here because we have students graduating from 12th grade and they're going on to college. But I added this in so that those students know that there's something out there, those students with disabilities know that there's something out there for them to have access to when they are when they get to college, and they can have real-time access just like everyone else. Now, let's talk about something that you have at your disposal, and that's computer accessibility supports. Now, every computer now has built into it accessibility supports. Your Windows, your Chromebooks, your desktop, your laptops, your MacBooks, iMac, Mac Mini, your Androids, and your iOS systems. They all have built-in accessibility, but I would dare say many of you probably have never even looked at those accessibilities. And so today we are going to take a little bit of a look at them quickly, and I will show you many other things too. iOS accessibility, you always have accessibility. So if you have an iPhone, I see someone is driving, so not you, but anyone else that's sitting at their desk. If you have an iPhone, go ahead and pull out your iPhone. I want you to look at it because you're going to see these things. I want you to go to your settings. When you go to your settings, if you scroll down, you will see accessibility. And if you click on accessibility, you will see that there are so many things that are available to students. And these things like spoken content, where they can actually speak these things to students. And when we're done at the end of this presentation, there is a link that I will probably send it. I would say I will send it in a chat, but I don't have it pulled up right now. I might be able to pull it up while we're talking. But with iOS accessibility, you will look at all of the objects that are accessible to students with disabilities. And many of you use these things now and you don't realize it. I see many people that have their alert on for a phone call. They have the phone placed on silent, but when the phone rings, the light clicks. All of that is accessibility. You have voice control, switch control, you have spoken content, audio descriptions. So anybody now that has been trained can use these accessibility options. And I say trained because it takes some knowledge of the accessibility options that are available. So Windows 11 accessibility, if you can see the screen, you will notice, and if you can see my cursor, you will notice that my cursor is a different color and it's a little bit larger. And the reason it's a little bit larger is because I made it that way. I could have made it as large as I really wanted it. I have seen so many people, I won't tell my age, but people my age often need things enlarged a little. And so when you look at the screen, you need things enlarged. I would say go in and go to your accessibility options and increase your text size, increase your mouse and pointer, increase the size and change the color. So many times I see people moving their mouse around so that they can find it. Change the color, change the size so that it's easier to see. Your text cursor makes everything appear thicker. Your magnifier, it's going to be bigger. Your color filters, all of these things are there for students with disabilities, but I dare say they're there for students without disabilities to use as well. Certain things just help. And I talked about this earlier in the presentation. Adjust your size and adjust your color. When you are creating things, make sure there's a big contrast in the colors that you're using. I often use black now, not because I love black. I just think that's just a big contrast when you have white writing on a black background. And so in this on this slide that you can see, there are several different things that you can have. You can have the black on white, the white on black, the blue on yellow. You can have so many, but go into your accessibility and look at your contrast themes. And I would say begin to use those in your classroom. Another thing I forgot to say is as you're looking at my captioning on the screen, The captioning on the screen helps with, believe it or not, it helps with students who have ADHD because it gives them something to focus on, and it's always moving, it's changing. And so students who have ADHD, using closed captioning when you're presenting with PowerPoint truly helps those students. Okay, as you can see in this screen, I made the text cursor bigger by just simply increasing the size that's in my accessibility options. I made my pointer bigger. You can increase the size and color of your pointer. Your magnifier, you can magnify things and make them really big so that the students can see on the screen. All of that's in accessibilities. You can magnify it as big as you need. But I would say if you're magnifying something so big that you're only capturing one or two words on the screen, that's really too big and you need to go to another option for that student. Now, here is a link, and I will put this link in the chat. But we have created here at the State Department of Education, we have created in conjunction with United Ability a lot of videos that will show you things that you can use and do in the classroom with students with disabilities. Now, activities for daily living. When you're looking at the activities for daily living, you are looking at things that will help people with physical disabilities. And so someone with a physical disability that has lost mobility in their hands, they may need some kind of device to help them open their door, or they may need some kind of device to help them eat, or they may need some kind of device to help them do all kinds of daily living skills. And I put these here because I wanted you all to see all the things that students with disabilities and people without disabilities can use. And why am I saying that? I am saying this because, let me see how to say, this is the only group that somebody can join in at any time. You could have a car accident, you could have a stroke, you could become sick, you could have some underlying issues that can happen, and people, you will need some of these things with disabilities, or perhaps you know someone who need these things with disabilities. I was really wasn't excited about the stroke, but when my mom had a stroke, I knew exactly what to do because I had this knowledge. So listening to this, I would dare say you could probably see or know someone who could take advantage of some of the things that we've talked about. Now, this is assistive technology for note taking. This is good for anybody. I don't have a disability, but I use audio notes for everything. And why do I use audio notes? And you're making these things, you're making things accessible for students with disabilities. I use audio notes because I can record. So anytime I'm at a conference, I'm recording that speaker. I'm not recording them to see what they did wrong. I'm recording the speaker because I want to know not to miss notes. As I'm taking notes, I want to hear what's being said because when I go to a conference, I want to know what they're talking about. So you have audio notes, you have notability, you have Sonoset audio note taker. Now the Live Scribe pen, man, it's great, but I always think it's a pen. And because it's a pen, I think I can set that down and someone else can pick it up. So it's great for students because they can record and go back to that point where they were recording and listen to it again. Just you could do the same thing with audio notes. But again, it's great for people who keep up with things. Not so much for me. AT for writing. So when you're looking at writing, let's look at these different desks that you can use in the classroom with students. And it may not be these, but you need to have adjustable height desks, not just for students with disabilities. Think about a classroom desk nowadays. How about these big football players and these tall basketball players? They can barely fit in those things. But if you have an adjustable desk with an adjustable chair, you make things easier for them. So remember, those things that started out for people with disabilities are now being used for people without disabilities. The slant board makes it easier to write. Different kinds of things that you have with your keyboards, and you can do keyboards on the screen and all of that. All of that is in accessibility. So let's look at your word prediction software. We all use that now. Co-writer was strictly for people with disabilities. Now we all use it. When we're texting, we text much faster because we have those word predictions coming up, trying to predict what we're saying. So Dragon Naturally Speaking, for people who may be double amputees, but there is nothing wrong with them cognitively, they can use voice recognition software. They can pen an entire novel or whatever it is they have to do. They can control their entire world by simply saying, Alexa, do this, Google, do that. They can control their entire world. These were things made for people with disabilities, but guess who's using it? We all are. Okay, AT for writing. One of the biggest requests I used to get when I was working in the school system is that students, they could think it in their head, but they could not get it down in writing on paper. That was one of the issues. They could think it, but they could not write it. They could say it, but they could not pen it. And so because of that, written expression is now really big. So you have a lot of paper and digital graphic organizers that will help students organize their thoughts on paper, but they can do it digitally. It will help them write because, as I just said, Dragon Naturally Speaking, because what we are as educators, we're not trying to figure out if the kid can write, we're trying to figure out what is it that they know? What do they know about the subject? And we can let them dictate that now in the Word, in any on any laptop, on any computer. They can now dictate all of those things. And with that being said, you've got the knowledge that they know. So we don't have to go through any of that anymore. So I went over this AT for reading already, AT for deaf and hard of hearing. We talked about the FM system. CART is real time captioning. You don't see that anymore, but that is usually, you don't see it a lot. That's usually where a person could be in New York and I could be an Alabama teacher, but they're typing everything I say word for word, real time, so that the students have what they need. Now, described and captioned media. This is a game changer. And it's a game changer because I'm going to show you what a described and captioned media looks like. And I hope this plays. Pernell, let me know if you can hear it because I just realized on some things they can hear and on some things they can't on the screen that I'm about to go to.
Okay.
A man and woman ascend through an empty lobby on an escalator.
We can hear it.
You
They
can.
stand silently on the moving platform as it conducts them upward. With an abrupt crash, the escalator stops.
Beat this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
The man pats his pockets.
No. Sorry.
His gaze sweeps over the empty lobby.
Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? Believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, enough left to do. That's it.
The pair stand motionless on the escalator. Later, another man in blue coveralls approaches a working escalator 2 floors below. He carries a brown case and calls up to the man, now slumped on one of the escalator stairs.
Hello. Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it.
A serviceman boards the working escalator, which flanks a set of stationary stairs to the left. He doubles over as his escalator stops abruptly. Servicemen below and the man and woman above exchange blank glances.
Description and captioning of Stuck on an Escalator was provided by the Described and Captioned Media program. Learn more about accessible media at www.dcmp.org.
Okay, what was so important about that is if you have a student in your classroom that is blind, everything was described so that student, because they could hear, so it was described what was going on so that they could get a visual of what was happening. If you had someone who was hearing impaired, you saw the captioning so that they could see what was being said. So if you're in a classroom and you are showing videos, then you need to look at those videos and see if they're captioned. And I will say this, be very careful not to just put up closed captioning for the first time. As an educator, look at the captioning to make sure it says what's being said, because sometimes captioning can capture the wrong thing. And so it's saying things other than what's being said. So make sure you look at the captioning before you show it in the classroom. So some of the issues students face with vision in the classroom, you can make the books accessible, because you see these things, the onyx, the topaz, jaws, all of these things. Students who have these visual issues, they have access through the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind so that they can get these things that they need in the classroom. So it's not that they just can't see, that they are trying, that it's not that they have to read a book. They can have the enlarged books. But you know what? Some students don't want those books because it makes them look so different. So you can give them a piece of equipment like this that they can carry from classroom to classroom, and it makes them feel much like everybody else. So when you're looking at things for vision, when you're looking at things for hearing, we want to keep the integrity of the child to make them as much of a teenager as everyone else is in that school. Okay, so you can see some of the things. Now, all the equipment doesn't have to be this big. What we're looking at in this picture is just this white camera. And then they did have a big screen in the classroom, and your systems can provide this for students who have disabilities. They can either do it in the classrooms that they're in, or they can have it somewhere where the student can use it. We try to make it real time for the students, so it just depends on truly what that student wants. And here's some assistive technology for communication. And these help students communicate who could not communicate. And I'll go ahead and tell the story that I often tell when we're looking at the communication devices and the communication apps. I worked with a student years ago. And with that student, we went into the home of that student. We were called into the home. I was the AT person, the assistive technology specialist. We had an occupational therapist, and we had a physical therapist to go into the home. This was a functioning child for all practical purposes. Nothing was wrong with him. And one day he just started falling. And the teachers and everyone at school and the parents thought, oh, boy, stop playing. They thought he was playing, but it was not. He had a disease that was now developing, because some disease progressed faster, some progressed slower. He had a disease much like ALS. It attacked his muscles. And so he was not falling on purpose. His muscles were being attacked. And when muscles are attacked, it attacks every muscle. And so eventually he was in a wheelchair. He could no longer speak. He could mouth things, but they weren't very recognizable. And so when we went into the home, we started talking to the grandmother, because his mom had died of that disease earlier. We started talking to the grandmother about what was going on. And she said she just made a statement one day, and that was the access point we needed. She said he controls the remote with his elbow. That's all we needed. Now we had a way to give this child communication. We had a way to give him speech. He already had a wheelchair, so he could have switches. And so the switch that we use is not in this picture for him, but it's much like the one that says talkable with built-in icons. We had two switches, and it was a Bluetooth switch, and it operated his iPad. And so it would scan on the iPad, he would click, and then it would scan vertically, it would scan different directions. And so with that being said, we now could put an app on the iPad that helped him communicate, and we could put an app on the iPad for all of his audio textbooks, because nothing was wrong with him cognitively. Cognitively, he was still intact. And so he could understand everything that was going on. He just needed access. We gave him that access, and because his cognitive abilities were still there, within one day he figured out that communication app, and he was talking to his siblings again. So that gave us such joy and such peace. So with many students with disabilities, you just need to find out their strength, not their weakness. And when you find out that strength, it supports everything. So for some kids that may be in your classroom, and all special needs kids at some point are in those general education classrooms because they need to be out amongst their quote normal peers. And so with that, they're always in your classroom. So you can make things available to them so that they can participate. Like you see this eye gaze board. You may have a child in your classroom who can't speak and they're young. We wouldn't necessarily use this with an older child unless that was our only way of communicating with that child. But if a child is younger and you have a communication and eye gaze board, you have engaged that student in your classroom with all of his, quote, as I say, normal peers. So you have a lot of adapted keyboards that you can use for students. And there are built-in accessibilities, as I said, and we're not going to talk about those today, but there are some built-in accessibilities that allow students that are built into the computer now. For example, sticky keys, filter keys, and then you have key guards, and you have all of these things that can overlay for a child that might have cerebral palsy or a child that has tremors. And if you just put your finger on a key and you hold it down, you're going to type, let's say we're on the W, we're going to type a gazillion W's. But for a child with a disability, we can use whatever the child's issue is. We can either use the filter keys or the sticky keys, depending on what they need, so that it only registers that letter once the child lets up off the letter or when that child presses the letter. It's whatever we are needing for that child to be able to do. You have adapted input. Some of these are extremely old pictures, and some of them we are still using, like ergonomically. You see where the kids are using the devices on their heads like head pointers. Those are old, but some kids still like to use them. But we also have it where everything is eye gaze now. And so you can look at it, you can look at a letter if you can control your eyes. With every student with a disability, it's going to be different as to what we use with them. You can't say that eye gaze works for everyone because that person may not be able to control their eyes, but they may be able to have just a twitch on the mouth. Whatever it is that student's strength is, then we're going to use that strength to help that student engage in the curriculum. All right. And so we have different mice that they can use to get in and out, and the computer. So you see here, this child is using his feet to navigate. We have so many kids that can use their feet to engage in the curriculum in the classroom. And I'm going to send Pernell, I don't know if he can send it out to you, but I will send him the link to watch these videos. These videos are game changers. Computer access, as you see that right there, the guy with the red shirt on, this shows you all of your computer options. There's no way I could have gone into all of these in detail today. But if you look at that video, he's going to show you all of the options you have in the computer so that you can work with students with disabilities in your classroom. Okay, and so with that being said, I am Sheila Bowling, and do we have any questions in the chat?
I don't see any at this time, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask at this time. And while they're getting their thoughts together on this, Sheila, I want to say thank you so much. And just to give a little backstory on why I asked Sheila to do this is because she shared it with us as ATEMs at one of our retreats. And I just thought that it would be so important to get this out to the masses, as many people as possible, because we heard it, but I wanted so many others to hear it as well. So thank you again, Sheila. We fought through the audio difficulties that we had, but we made it through. I do see a lot of thank yous and amazing popping up in the chat. No questions just yet, but I did want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me.